I think it wasn't just the question of reparations. It was also the issue of, well, it's not the reparations as in them having to pay reparations, but even bringing up the issue itself. Because bringing up the issue of reparations, of course, brings up the issue of enslavement.
Yes.
You know, so there's a moral issue and there's the issue of, you know, recompensing. So, I'm getting strengthened, you know, it's like my batteries are charging, you know, just being here amongst you and just listening. You know, we've just come from a Black History meeting, you know, with my sister, you know, Stanisa, at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And, you know, I came straight from the airport, you know, straight in there, you know, listening. And I thought, I'm just being blessed because I have the privilege of meeting with Africans, you know, across the Atlantic, you know. Right. I'm at home and then I come across the Atlantic and I'm still meeting this part of our global family and meeting them wherever it is that I go to. And I tell you, that's a privilege. And that's what strengthens us. You know, not just talking about it, but knowing it. You know, and this is the kind of picture that we need to have, a full picture. You know, a complete picture, a global picture. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me here. You know, and to WADU, thank you for inviting me. And to those who've organized the meetings, you know, we come and, you know, everywhere is nice and it's good, but it's tedious. This process of organizing, it's tedious and it's thankless. And we need to appreciate that, you know, when the spaces are provided for. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, you know, for having us here. I represent Moyo Wataifa, like I said in the other meetings, the Pan-African Women's Solidarity Network. Our name is in Swahili. It means, you know, heart of the nation. You know, women are the global heart of the nation. And we have the name in Swahili because, you know, as Africans, we need to have a lingua franca. And hopefully our children will manifest that they'll be able to meet African children from different parts of the world and be able to converse with them, you know, in languages other than that, you know, of our oppressors. So that's something that we need to look, you know, forward to. It's so powerful. Who do you represent? That's right. Which ancestor are you providing a microphone for? Who? And it doesn't have to be one. It can be two. Or some who? Because if it's not one of our great ones, it must be somebody else. So who is it? You need to be clear about who it is.
We have to be clear.
We have to be clear. That's right. Thank you for that. I had something very interesting. So the first Pan-Africanists were those of our people who joined, you know, together to fight on the ships as they were being kidnapped away from home, you know, to confront the oppressor. And, you know, it's interesting. Can you visualize that? That, you know, in terms of resistance, those were the first Pan-Africanists. You know, so a lot of times we see, you know, we want to, you know, obviously a lot of us are, you know, operate from very Eurocentric analysis. You know, the first one is the one who has the copyright for something. You know, that's the first person, you know, who wrote the thing down and has a copyright. You know, this brother said, no, it's the people on the ships, you know, that joined together in that fight, that recognized that their destiny, you know, was together. They would either swim together or sink together. So it's interesting, and I'm just saying all this to say that, you know, every day you learn, but the learning must be for a purpose. It must be for a purpose of using the knowledge as a weapon for liberation.
That's right.
Not using it as a skill for acquisition of knowledge and, you know, aggrandizing yourself. Oh, I'm so clever, I know so much. If your knowledge is not being utilized, if our knowledge is not being utilized for our liberation, then we're a waste of space. Right?
Yes.
Correct. In simple English. You know, I could have said that in much nicer form, but it probably wouldn't hit home. It's true.
Make it plain.
You know. So that, you know, Africa was a global nation. You know, it wasn't a geographical space, you know, limited. And of course, that battle, there were lots of people, you know, and somebody like Nkrumah took that on in terms of attempting to take Gavis into another level, using the instruments of the state, instruments of power, which, you know, they had mobilized, you know, our people, Africans, the so-called Gold Coast at that time that later on became Ghana, had mobilized to acquire power to in their own self-interest, you know. And Nkrumah was then able to attempt to actualize this vision, you know, that Garvey had laid out, this black print, like we say, you know, not a blueprint, but a black print, you know, for global black power, was able to actualize that and to show us that it can be done. It's not a question of rhetoric, it's not a question of dreaming, it's not a question of just talking, but that it was real, we could do it. And if you've studied, you know, what happened within the short, you know, 9 to 10 years that he was in government in Ghana, you know, he was able to do so much within that short time. Now, what I want to share today is the analysis of what happened after that, you know, up till today, and where we are in the picture, you know, as global Africans in the 21st century. You see, after we defeated colonialism on the continent, as you know, the battle was then raging in this part of the world, you know, so-called civil rights struggle, which, you know, we got an analysis of earlier. And white supremacists thought that they had lost one battle, but then they realized they needed to come back, you know, through another side. So, for example, because we're in the US, let's talk about the role of the US, because prior to this, the US would always pride itself that it wasn't a colonial power. You know, the propaganda that they used to market abroad was that they themselves had suffered from colonialism, so they could, you know, be in empathy with us, you know, that they had defeated, you know, their own British oppressors. Right. So they were in the same boat as us, you know, so they were, you know, we were blood brothers and sisters. In this case, there are no sisters usually, just blood brothers, you know. So back to the narrative about the takeover. So the takeover started as friendships. And when they realized that there were some regimes on the continent that would not be fooled by this pretense of friendship, you know, regimes like that of Bosajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and others like Ahmed Sékou Touré in Guinea, who, you know, said to the French, you know, get lost. You know, we want our independence. We don't want to be an ally, you know, of France, you know, or an appendage of France. And I don't know if people know what the French did. They, you know, I don't know what to say. They even removed the wall electrical plugs. Toilet seats. They tore everything out. So you want us to leave? We're leaving. Took the carpets and tried to take, you know, the cement under the carpets too. That was a bit difficult. But the point being made is they tore out everything and left Guinea bound, you know. Its political manifestation, which is imperialism. We've got to understand these different, you know, sides, that this is what we're dealing with. Until we have that understanding, we're not going to be able to, you know, go to the heart of its defeat. So like I was saying, a lot of the other leaders did not understand that and thought, you know, they could, you know, be pally, or they could reason with it. And so one of the things they started bringing in, oh, we'll help you do this, you know, you're new nations, you know, we'll give you aid, we'll give you military assistance, we'll give you consultants, you know, we'll do everything for you. And our people thought, what kind wonderful people these are. You know, they're much nicer than the British. They're confused, thinking there's a difference between Peter and Paul. Not understanding. These are twins from the same mother. Yes. You know, just came out 1 minute after each other. Right. Essentially, you know, the same system. And so these things started being introduced, you know, to us. And we started, you know, thinking, yes, I can grab, you know, and that's the other thing. A lot of us have this narrow mentality that we can be cleverer than the imperialist. Yeah. That we will outsmart the imperialist at his own game. Yeah. We don't want to change the game. We just think we can outsmart him. That could never happen.
That's right. So true.
And we also think that we can outsmart him, that rather than join up with the rest of you, I will outsmart him, just me as an individual, because I'm smarter than the rest of you. And then when I outsmart him, you know, then I can be the big, you know, boss amongst us. But see, you had an Nkrumah who was able to see through that and see beyond that, and understood that we need to have a union, you know, we need to operate in a union. We need to have, and that's why the first thing is, seek ye first the political kingdom. and everything else. Nowadays, we tend to dismiss that no, seek ye first the economic kingdom. But how can you have economics if you have no politics? Because it is politics that determines your economics. But some of us just think, oh, economics for economics' sake. And of course, economics does bring you power, leverage. You know, so it's a chicken and egg situation. But usually, you know, it's the politics that determines, you know, and directs the economics. Another thing that is important for us to see, when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966, remember that between the 50s and the 60s when he was in power, I think it was 30-something countries that gained independence within such a short time, because Ghana offered itself as a base for our liberation movement.
Offered its resources.
Resources, yes. Everything. But as soon as they took him out, there was a whole, so the whole of Southern Africa, their liberation got delayed. Because even at the time they took him out, he was preparing an army to go and confront, you know, the racists in Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe. You know, there were just so many dynamics, so much politics going on that, you know, we couldn't even see, you know, directly. So the point I'm making is these things, the things that happen have implications, you know, on us. You know, affect us, you know, in our daily life without us even understanding.
That's right.
Yeah? 3 things. Frantz Fanon says in a quote, I think this was in the 60s, says every generation out of relative obscurity must identify its mission and either fulfill it or betray it. With no middle ground. Every generation out of relative obscurity, you understand that it's usually not very clear, out of relative obscurity must identify its mission, either fulfill it or betray it. That's Frantz Fanon. Nkrumah says organization determines everything. Organization determines everything. Nehanda says, my bones shall rise again. We are Nehanda of Zimbabwe. And of course, Gabby says, rise up, you mighty race, for you can accomplish whatever that you will. Let those messages go into our spirits, into our minds, and then come out as manifestations. Good evening, beloved.